Warhipster here, coming at you with another painting tutorial, and today we're painting the Light of Eltharion from the new Lumineth Realm-lords range. They're so excited to get cracking with these guys. As a quick note before we begin, he may look like I primed him in the usual grace here, but in fact he has been primed with Corax White. And the reason for this is we want him to be as bright as possible as a starting point. So, with that bit of business out of the way, what we're going to do is we're going to work on his armor first. And the color we're going to make a roughly 3 parts contrast medium to 1 part skeleton horde. And what we want to do is we want to take this on our brush, and as we apply it, we want to be very careful because we don't want to have any kind of really gross dark pooling. What we want is we just want a nice soft cream color to appear on that armor like this. So I'm not using very much as I do it, just a very small amount as I go. I'm going to get this all over all of that armor, and we just want to kind of finish each section before we move on because we don't want it to dry and get all scratchy. Don't worry too much about being completely neat here. We just want to focus on getting this all over all of that armor like this. As you can see, it's already coming out quite nicely. That nice soft cream. And once that skeleton horde and contrast medium mix is dry, what we're going to do is going to create another mix of roughly 5 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood. I'm going to apply this slightly differently. We're just going to use a small amount, and we're going to effectively do a recessed shade of this color down each of the panels like this, just to add a tiny little bit of variation to these armor panels. Now this part is really fiddly. It will probably take you the longest across the whole miniature. It's absolutely worth it. So as you can see, all I'm doing is I'm using small amounts and just running it into those recesses. Like this. It doesn't matter too much if you get it on the edges, because we're going to highlight those. But we want to avoid getting it all over the flats of the panels. And with that Wyldwood recess shade applied, you can see we've now got that really lovely tone and depth on the armor. So what we're going to do next is we're now going to highlight all the armor, and the color that we're going to be using is Pallid Witch Flesh. So I've got some thin down here on my palette, and what I want to do is I want to now pick out all of that edging all the way around all of that armor with this Pallid Witch Flesh. Like this. And this is quite a thick highlight because we want to effectively get this Pallid Witch Flesh over the entire of the edging, just to really brighten him up. Like this. So once again, just take your time. And then we'll come back. And with all that Pallid Witch Flesh applied, the armor is very nearly finished. All we're going to do now is going to take a small amount of Corax White. We just want to apply this to the sharpest areas of the armor. So we just want to effectively give it the impression of the light catching. So we're talking about like the little corners of things and where the kind of where the decorative stuff kind of meets. So we've got like up here, just on that little corner like that. So we just want to go around picking out all of these areas with the Corax White, and then we can move on. And with that done, the armor is now finished. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on the black details next. And there's two different stages to this, because when you look at the box art, the outside of the cloak around here has got a blue sheen to it, whereas the rest of it is quite cold and has got a more of a grey highlight to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on the kind of the areas like his tabard, his skirt, the backs of his legs, and the inside of the cloak first. And the colour that we're going to be using first is Basilicanum Grey. So what we want to do is we want to take the Basilicanum Grey on our brush, and we want to make contact with the model, and we just want to pull it down around these areas in these nice big broad brush strokes. So effectively just want to kind of get a nice smooth coat. We want to be really careful when we get close to all that armor. Like this. Don't worry too much if you get it on that scale mail, because we'll be going over that with metallic, so it doesn't matter too much. And just use your brush to pick up any excess paint where you've left it. Like this. So you just want to keep going around, picking out all of these black bits. As I said, just leave that outside of the cloak for now, because we're going to do that slightly differently. And once all that Basilicanum Grey is dry, what we're going to do is going to create a roughly 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Akhelian Green mix. I'm going to use this for the outside of the cloak. And so once again, we're going to be very careful as we get close to any of that armor that we've already painted. And we're going to paint using this contrast medium and Akhelian Green mix with these big broad brush strokes. And next up, once that Akhelian Green is dry, we want to do a very similar thing again. Only this time we're going to use a 4 parts contrast medium to 1 part Leviadon Blue mix. And we're going to use this in much the same way as we did over the top of that Akhelian Green. Like this. And once that's done, we're going to take that same mix again, and we're going to continue to glaze it down. And what we're going to do now at this point is, when we're on the sharpest areas, is we're going to start trying to leave some of that Akhelian Green and Leviadon Blue showing through. So up here in the top recesses, what we want to do is we want to kind of make contact with the model in the recess and pull it down like this, just leaving a slither of it there shining through like that. As you can see, just a little bit of that previous mix, still just untouched. So we want to go around like this, just colouring it all in. And with that done, we now want to create a roughly 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part Leviadon Blue mix. And we're going to use this in much the same way that we've already done on those previous couple of glazes. We just want to get this all over, but we want to kind of try and miss the raised areas now. So we want to make contact with the model. I want to pull it down in these nice big broad brush strokes like this. And with that Leviadon Blue and contrast medium mix applied, we're now going to take a roughly 1-to-1 mix of contrast medium and black Templar. I'm going to apply this over all of those black details, including the Basilicanum Grey bits that we did before. And once again, the application is broadly the same. We just want to make contact with the model and use these big broad brush strokes to build this up. Now you might need to do a couple of layers of this to get it nice and dark, but the reason we're using the contrast medium is so that we just have a little bit more control over this Black Templar as it goes on, like this. So you want to do a couple of coats, as I say, and just keep going until you get to the kind of deep dark black that you want. It should only take 2, but in some cases it might take 3. So just basically it's up to you. And with those 2 glazes of Black Templar applied, you can see we've now got some really lovely, well, we've got a really lovely kind of blue sheen on that back of the cape, and we've got a really nice dark inner kind of fabric. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply some highlights to all of this, and the first colour that we're going to use is some thinned down Dawnstone, and this is for all of the kind of the inner robes, so not the back bit but for this inner part like this. And what we want to do is we just want to take this Dawnstone, we just want to start picking out all of the raised areas like this. And next up, with all that Dawnstone applied, we're now going to take some thinned down Administratum Grey, and we're going to apply another highlight to all of these greyish black areas. So as I say, we are actually just leaving the blue bit for now because we don't want to highlight those with those greys. We're just doing these little bits down here, the ones that we originally did with Basilicanum Grey. So what we want to do is we want to take this Administratum Grey just around the sharpest areas and on the corners and things. We want to use this Administratum Grey like this. And with that Administratum Grey applied to those grey-black areas, we're now going to highlight the bluish cape, and the colour we're going to be using is Fenrisian Grey. And we don't want very much on this on our brush as we do this, because we want to be very careful. And we want to just run a small Fenrisian Grey highlight down the centre of each of these blue areas on the cape, because all of the glazes that we've done have created all that subtle shading and that moving through all the colours. So we just want to have the light catch in the absolute sharpest areas with this Fenrisian Grey. Like this. And with that Fenrisian Grey applied, we now just want to use a teeny tiny amount of blue horror. We want to add this basically to the corners of all of the black, bluey black. And with that blue horror highlight applied, the cape is now finished. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint in all of the kind of bluish greeny tassels that you can see around. So we've got areas like this little tassel here, the long ribbon on the back of his head, and the ones hanging off the back of the cape. And the colour that we're going to be using for this is Akhelian Green. Just take a small amount on our brush, and we want to be very careful now. You just want to get this all over these tassels. And next up, once that Akhelian Green is dry, we're going to use some Fenrisian Grey just to highlight all of these little bits. Like this. You just want to pick out those raised areas once again on the tassels and the corners and things, and the edges on the long bit of fabric up here. And with that Fenrisian Grey highlight applied to all of that Akhelian Green, we've now finished off all of those sections. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on his hair next. So this is this bit here, and there's a little bit just back here, and obviously on the other side. So the colour we're going to be using for this is 3 parts contrast medium to 1 part Space Wolves Grey. And what we want to do is we just want to take this mix and we want to paint this all over all of that hair, like this. With that Space Wolves Grey mix applied, what we want to do is we want to take a little bit of Space Wolves Grey, just a small amount. That's actually too much. And what we want to do is around the base of the headdress, we just want to build up that blue like this. And with that extra bit of Space Wolves Grey applied, what we want to do is we want to take a small amount of Corax White. We now just want to highlight all of the strands of this headdress. And with that headdress all done, it's now time to work on the metallics. So we're going to start with that white gold. And the colour we're going to make is a mixture of 1 part Retributor Armour, 1 part Stormhost Silver, and 2 parts Aggaros Dunes, and then a tiny little bit of water just to thin it down and give it a good flow. And then what we do is we take that paint on our brush and we just want to start picking out all of the metallics. So we want areas like the scale mail, his knee pads, this device in here, the trim on the hair piece, so this bit around here, this bit on the helmet and the hilts of the swords, and the decorative features on the scabbard. And next up, once all that white gold is dry, we want to create a roughly 4:1 mix of contrast medium and Wyldwood. I'm going to use this to shade all of that gold. And with all that shading applied, what we're going to do is we're going to create another mix of almost the same, but we're going to be 1 part Retributor Armour, 2 parts Stormhost Silver, and 2 parts Aggaros Dunes. I'm going to just mix it all together with a bit of water to give us a nice pale white gold. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this to highlight all of that gold once again, like this, just avoiding any recesses, and we just want to pick out all of the edges on here to give it that real, as we're calling it, white gold aspect. You can see there like that. Similarly on the scale mail, what we want to do is we want to just effectively colour in the whole of each of these areas and just leave that shade in the recesses where it's settled, so it's nice and pale. And next up, with all of that gold silver mix applied, you can see he's looking very nearly finished. So what we're going to do just to finish off that gold is we're going to use some Stormhost Silver just on its own. We're just going to add this to the edges of the scale mail and any of the other sharpest points on all of this gold, just to really make it bling like that. And with all that Stormhost Silver applied, it's now time to paint in the steel blades. And the colour we're going to be using for that is some thinned down Grey Knight steel. So we just want to get a nice even coverage of this all over the swords, like this. We want to just be extra careful when we get close to that gold. And once that Grey Knight steel is dry, what we want to do is we want to take some thinned down Iron Hands steel, and we want to use this on the flats of the blades, but we want to avoid the inside of those runes. So we just want to get this hand steel like this all along the flat, like that. Similarly again on the other side. Just avoiding the recess of that rune, so we get these two different silvers going on. Similarly on the big sword, there's a lot more runing going on here. So what we want to do is we want to get this iron hand steel all along the flat, just avoiding like that. And with all of that iron hand steel applied, we now want to shade those blades, and the colour we're going to use is Gryph Charger Grey. So what we want to do is we want to mostly concentrate this shade in those recesses of those blades, like this. We also want to use this small amount of this Gryph Charger Grey just along the flats of the blades. We don't want to use loads because we don't want to completely turn all that silver into this grey colour. So just take your time with this. And with that Gryph Charger Grey all dry, we're now going to once again use iron hand steel, and this is just to brighten up that flat of the blade once more. We just want to be very careful as we do this now. So as not to get any of this iron hand steel inside that recess. And once that iron hand steel is dry, you can see we've got a really lovely sharp looking blade now. So all we want to do to finish these off is we want to take some Stormhost Silver and we want to highlight the edges of the swords. Like this. We also want to pick out any of the edges in here on the rune. And with that done, the swords are now finished and they're really sharp and shiny and looking awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on the gems, and they are this big one here on the shoulder and set into the hilts of the blades. And the colour that we're going to be using for this is Magos Purple. And what we want to do is we just want to basically just get this Magos Purple all over these areas like this. And then next up, once that Magos Purple is dry, what we want to do is we want to create a roughly 1-to-1 mix of Fulgrim Pink and Corax White, and thin it down with a bit of water to give us this really nice thin pink glaze that we're just going to put all over the tops of these gems, just leaving that Magos Purple in the recesses. And once that Fulgrim Pink and Corax White mix is dry, we want to take a small amount of Corax White on its own, not very much at all, and we just want to effectively draw a highlight around the top of the gem like that. It's a really subtle little highlight. And with those gems done, all that remains to do now is the handles of the blade. And the colour that we're going to use for these is Aethermatic Blue. You don't want loads. Kind of effectively, again, just almost want to just stain it this colour. Like that. We want it to be a nice subtle blue just poking through underneath. So just use a small amount and then use your brush to just pull it off and make sure that the strongest pigment, the best kind of the darkest colours are in the recess towards the top. So you can see like that, it's just a really nice soft blue. So again, just using a small amount, particularly around here. And with those handles of his swords done, he is now finished, the Eltharion himself. So all that's left to do is his base. And so what we're going to do is we're going to work on the rocks, and we're going to be using 3 colours for this. We're going to be using Gryph Charger Grey, Space Wolves Grey, and Skeleton Horde. Now really, it doesn't matter what sort of order that you do this in, but what we're going to do is we're going to go from left to right. Now what we want to do is we only want to use these on these big rocks. So what we do is we take our first colour, which is Gryph Charger Grey, and we just want to start slapping it all over these rocks, like this, in certain areas of our choosing. So we're just going to get good coverage of this over here until we're bored of using it. So I think round about now, like that. So with that Gryph Charger Grey, what we do is we wash our brush, and then we grab some Space Wolves Grey, and then we just start over where the colours meet. We just add the Space Wolves Grey, just being really careful when we get close to Eltharion himself, like that. So you can see we've already got a really nice little transition going on. What we're going to do then is we're going to grab a little bit of Skeleton Horde, and just over these 2 colours, just going to add a little bit of dirt, like that, just to knock it off the vibrancy of that blue. And what this does is it just blends the Space Wolves Grey and the Gryph Charger Grey together, like that. So we just want to go around doing it like this, and then we'll come back. And next up, once that's dry, we're going to use some Wyldwood. And this is going to be for all that soil on the ground. And once that Wyldwood is dry, what we want to do is we want to take some Militarum Green, and we want to use this on all of the grass. And with that Militarum Green all applied to that grass, we're now going to do the rest of the base. And the colour we're going to be using is Stirland Battlemire. And this is to match that soil that we've already put on. And once that Stirland Battlemire is dry, what we want to do is you want to give all of that base a dry brush of Tyrant Skull. So you just want to catch all of that soil, all that Stirland Battlemire, and we also want to just catch the edges very gently on the stonework as well to apply a highlight, as well as on that grass as well. Like I say, we're just doing this dry brush all over the base. And with that dry brush applied, I've also added some tufts just to block in that empty space around his base. So all that's left to do is to colour in the rim. And the colour I'm going to be using is Steel Legion Drab for this. It will require 1 or 2 thin coats, but you could paint the rim of your base whatever colour you want. And with the rim of the base complete, the Light of Eltharion is now finished, and what a stunning miniature. I mean, the technology that's gone into this to make this hollow hero of a fallen age, I just adore it so much. There's so much character in it. It's such a unique miniature. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me further like these legends on the screen, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/warhipster or go to ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, do all that good stuff. And if you want to be kept up to date, make sure to click the bell icon.
Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.